This is Gentle Confessions, where truth whispers and healing begins in the quiet. Tier 1. The laugh that shouldn't have happened. I don't know why I laughed. Even now, all these years later, I still can't explain it in a way that makes sense. Maybe it was the awkwardness. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe, in some cruel corner of my mind, I just didn't know how to deal with something I didn't understand. We were sitting on the floor of her dorm room, legs crossed, backs resting against opposite sides of her tiny twin mattress. The smell of burnt popcorn still lingered in the air, an inside joke from earlier. She'd burned it so badly it looked like charcoal in a bowl. We'd laughed then. The kind of laugh that hurts your ribs and waters your eyes. But that wasn't the laugh that ruined everything. It was the one that came about 20 minutes later, when her voice got quiet. Too quiet. When her eyes lost focus. When her hands began to tremble ever so slightly like the wings of a trapped bird. I didn't notice at first. I thought she was tired, or distracted, or bored. So I kept talking, rambling, really about nothing. About the paper I had due the next morning. About the cold pizza we should have ordered instead of burning snacks. Anything to keep the mood light. Anything to pretend nothing was happening. But something was happening. And it was happening inside her. She tried to speak. Her voice cracked. She looked at me. And I could see it, the sheer panic in her face. Like she was drowning. And I was the only one who could see it. And do you know what I did? I smiled. Then, I laughed. Not a loud laugh. Not mean. Not mocking. But a nervous, awkward, unbelieving laugh. A what's going on laugh. A laugh that said, this isn't serious. Right. She recoiled. As if I'd slapped her. And in a way, maybe I had. She curled her knees into her chest, wrapped her arms around them like a shield, and whispered, I can't breathe. That's when it hit me like a fist to the chest. This wasn't her being dramatic. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't nothing. She was having a panic attack. A real one. And I had laughed. I froze. My body felt cemented to the floor. I wanted to move to reach out, to comfort her, to do something. But all I could think about was how stupid I'd been. How wrong. How heartless I must have looked. The moment passed in silence. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just shut down. Like a light going out. Like a door quietly closing. And I sat there in the dim light of her desk lamp, surrounded by silence and the smell of burnt popcorn, realizing I'd broken something I couldn't fix. That laugh, my laugh, echoed louder than any apology I could ever offer. And that night, when I went back to my room, I didn't sleep. Not even a minute. I just stared at the ceiling, replaying it over and over. And I knew things would never be the same again. Tier 2. What her silence meant. The sun the next morning felt too bright, as if it was mocking me. Like the world had the audacity to keep turning after what I had done. I didn't even brush my hair. didn't touch the leftover coffee sitting on my desk. All I could think about was her face. That moment. The laugh. My laugh. I stood outside her door for 10 minutes before I knocked. I raised my hand 3 times, lowered it each time. I thought, what if she doesn't answer? What if she tells me to go away? What if she's crying in there, alone, because of me? But eventually, I knocked. 2 soft taps, like I was asking for permission to breathe. There was silence. Then the sound of a chair scraping the floor. Footsteps. A pause. The door opened just enough for me to see one eye. Her eye. It wasn't angry. It wasn't red from crying. It was worse than that. It was quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that says I've already said everything I needed to. And now, I have nothing left. Hey, I whispered. It came out shaky. Small. She looked at me, that same look you give a stranger when you're trying to remember why you once knew their name. Detached. Distant. I just wanted to check on you, I said. My voice cracked at the edges. Still no words from her. But she stepped back. Left the door open. That was something. At least. I walked in. Everything was still in place. Her room always looked like she'd moved in just yesterday, minimal. Neat. Like she never really unpacked her whole heart. I sat down in the same spot on the floor, my back to the same bed, where I'd laughed the night before. She didn't sit. She stood across the room, hands folded in front of her like she was protecting something fragile. Herself. Maybe. I'm sorry, I said. The words felt too thin for what I'd done, like trying to patch a dam with tissue paper. She finally spoke. And what she said, it wasn't angry. It wasn't dramatic. It was worse. You made me feel small, she said. 4 words. Just 4. But they burned hotter than any insult could have. They settled into my ribs like stones. I opened my mouth to defend myself. Maybe to explain. But what was there to say? I didn't know. I whispered. She nodded. Not as if she agreed, but as if she knew I'd say that. That's the problem, she said. You didn't want to know. I think I stopped breathing in that moment. Because she was right. I'd seen her discomfort. I'd heard the way her voice trembled. But I chose to laugh instead of ask. Chose to smile instead of pause. Chose me instead of her. She sat down. Finally. On the bed this time. Not close. But not far enough to shut me out completely. I'm not mad, she said. But I don't know if I trust you anymore. I nodded slowly. That hurt too. But I deserved it. I'll earn it back, I said. She didn't respond. Didn't nod. Didn't smile. She just looked down at her hands like they held the pieces of herself she'd gathered after I shattered them. I left quietly after that. She didn't ask me to. But I knew. She needed space more than she needed my guilt sitting beside her. I walked the halls back to my room like I was carrying something heavy in my chest. And maybe I was. Shame is heavy. Especially when it's wrapped in laughter you wish you could take back. Tier 3. the apology. She never asked for the days that followed felt slower, like everything in the world had taken one step back, and I was stuck in that pause. The kind of pause between a word and a sigh. We didn't talk much. Not really. But we saw each other in the kitchen, in the shared laundry room, in the hallway. Every time I looked at her face for some sign, anything, and she'd nod. Sometimes, just a small tilt of her head, like a candle flickering in a room too big. I stopped trying to fix it right away. That was hard. I wanted to bring her coffee, leave notes, do grand gestures. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about proving anything. It was about listening, for once. So I stayed soft, present, quiet. One evening, I found myself in the kitchen, just standing there, stirring soup that didn't really need stirring. And she walked in. She didn't flinch, didn't turn back. She opened the cupboard above me, reached for a glass, and said, in the gentlest tone I'd heard since that night, "You don't have to avoid me. You know, I think my hands stopped moving. The spoon just floated. I'm not avoiding you," I said, even though we both knew I was. She smiled. Not the kind you share with friends, but the kind that slips out when someone admits the thing you were hoping they'd say. "I know you feel bad," she said. "And I'm not going to make you beg for forgiveness." I blinked. Hard. She leaned against the counter, looking tired, but not cold. "I've had panic attacks since I was 13, she said. I stayed silent. She went on. "I used to hide them. In closets, behind bookshelves, bathroom stalls. Anywhere no one could see me fall apart." I felt my throat tighten. I didn't know this version of her. Didn't know she carried that weight for so long. Then, she said softly, I started trusting a few people. Letting them be there when it happened. Not to fix it, just to witness it. She looked up at me. "And the night I trusted you, you laughed." I swallowed. It hurt. Even now. "I know," I whispered. "I wish I could go back." She shook her head gently. "That's the thing," she said. "You can't. But you can move forward differently." I nodded. It wasn't permission. It wasn't a reset. But it was a bridge. A fragile one. Built from quiet understanding and the smallest courage to stand in the same room again. I looked down at the soup. I made too much. I said. She raised an eyebrow. Too much for one person, I nodded. Half a smile this time. She pulled a bowl from the cabinet. "I'll take some," she said. "Just don't laugh if I spill." And that made me chuckle. Not loudly. Not sharply. Just softly. Like the air finally had room for something other than regret. Tier 4. The porch where we sat with silence that weekend. The rain paused just long enough for the porch to dry. She stepped outside first. Wrapped in her gray sweater. Hair pulled back. Eyes tired but soft. I followed with 2 mugs of tea, mine chamomile. Hers lavender. Because she once told me, lavender made her feel less alone. We didn't plan to talk. There was no, We need to clear the air moment. No script. Just two people and a quiet porch with enough room for a new kind of silence. We sat. Two wooden chairs. Worn cushions. The scent of wet wood still lingering in the rails. And it was still. Still in the way the world can be when it knows something heavy has shifted, but doesn't want to startle it away. She took a sip, then another, and said nothing. So I matched her silence. Not out of fear this time, but respect. Sometimes healing is just not interrupting what someone finally has the space to feel. The wind moved a few leaves across the steps. A bird somewhere tried out a half-hearted melody, but gave up halfway through. That's when she spoke. You know, she said, I almost moved out the morning after it happened. I turned slightly, but I didn't say anything yet. I packed a bag. She continued, just some clothes and my sketchbook. Didn't know where I'd go. Just wanted out. I breathed in slowly, held it for a second, let it out like I was letting go of an apology I hadn't found words for. But, she said. Then I sat by the window, watched the sun come up, and realized, if I left, you'd never understand. Her voice didn't shake. It didn't tremble. It just floated, like a memory being folded into the air so gently it could almost disappear. I didn't stay for you, she said, turning her eyes toward the edge of the porch. I stayed for me. I nodded. Still. I whispered, I'm glad you did. A moment passed. She smiled, not at me, but at something distant. A thought. Perhaps. I don't need you to feel guilty anymore, she said. That caught me. I need you to grow from it. Because if you carry guilt, it makes everything about you. And this was never just about you. That one pierced gently. Not as punishment, but clarity. I want to be the kind of person who understands better now, I said. Not just the person who's sorry for the past. She turned to me, this time with full presence in her gaze. I think you're getting there, she said. We both sipped. The tea was cooler now. The sky had turned golden in its quiet descent toward evening. You know what hurt the most? She asked suddenly. It wasn't that you laughed. It was that you didn't check on me after. That one stayed in the air like the final chord of a song that needed to be heard before silence could return. I nodded again. I was scared. I admitted. Scared of making it worse. Scared of being the villain in your story. She tilted her head. And do you still think you're the villain I thought for a while? Then answered no. But I think I was the one who needed to grow up. A soft hum of wind passed between us. It carried nothing and everything. She reached for her tea again, smiled into her cup, and said I used to think people couldn't change. But I've seen it happen. We stayed out there until the first stars showed up. No big revelation, no grand gesture. Just two chairs, one long overdue conversation. And the kind of quiet only trust can rebuild. Tier 5, the letter I never sent. Dear you, I've written this letter more times than I can count, on scraps of napkins, in the margins of notebooks, In my head, mostly when the house gets too quiet, and I can almost hear the echoes of the silence we used to sit in. I never sent it. Not because I didn't want you to read it, but because I wasn't sure I deserved to write it in the first place. But tonight, something feels different. Maybe it's the rain again, tapping against my window like it remembers that day too. Maybe it's the fact that I found your old scarf still tucked in the hall closet, carrying a trace of lavender and a memory I never earned back. Or maybe I've finally become the version of me you once believed could change. So here it is. The letter I never sent. The one I hope you don't need anymore. But still, maybe deserve to hear. I remember that night too well. You were on the floor, breathing like the room had disappeared, like your chest was betraying you. And all I chose to do was let fear wrap itself around my ignorance and turn it into a joke. I laughed because I didn't understand. Because panic, to me, was something distant, a word I'd heard but never honored. Because sometimes people respond to things they can't handle by pretending they don't exist. But you were real. So was your pain. And I failed to meet you there. That moment rewired something in me. I didn't know it then, but it did. Because I saw what happened when someone trusted me with their most vulnerable moment, and I handed it back to them wrapped in silence and shame. You could have walked away for good. You would have been justified, but you didn't. You stayed not for me, but for yourself. And maybe, in some strange way, for the hope that I could learn. I want you to know that I did. Not all at once. Not neatly. But slowly. Like sunlight peeling open a winter morning quiet. Careful. Honest. I read. I listened. I sat with people who had stories I used to dismiss. And I stopped talking over the kind of pain that used to scare me silent. I stopped flinching at vulnerability. And started holding it like the fragile, holy thing it is. I'll never get to rewrite that night. But I hope I've rewritten the kind of person I am because of it. And you're a part of that. Not because you needed to be, but because I needed to remember what it meant to be held accountable by someone who still chose grace. If we were to sit on that porch again, years later, tea cooling between us, the sky folding into night, I'd look you in the eye and say thank you. Not just for staying, but for seeing something in me that I hadn't yet earned. And for letting me arrive even after I miss the first step. Sometimes I wonder if you ever think about that night again. If it still haunts you the way it used to haunt me, I hope not. I hope your life is filled with people who hear you fully, who hold space not because they're supposed to, but because they know the cost of not doing so. And I hope you laugh again. Not to mask something, but because joy found its way back to you. I won't send this letter. You'll never read it. But maybe it's not really for you anymore. Maybe it's for the part of me that needed to forgive himself so he could finally be the kind of friend who never needs to write a letter like this again. Sleep gently tonight, wherever you are, and know that somewhere, Someone who once failed you is trying to live every day in a way that honors the moment he got it wrong. With quiet sincerity, me. This is Gentle Confessions, where truth speaks in a whisper, and healing begins in the quiet.